today I'm going to be taking a closer look at what is probably still classed as the holy grail of LEGO Star Wars collecting. But to do so, we're going to need to head to Bespin. It's pretty far, but I think we can make it. Of course, I'm talking about the 7 minifigures from the iconic 2003 Cloud City set. So what actually makes these figures so rare and therefore expensive? Well, there's a number of reasons. In 2003, £80 for a LEGO set was an eye-watering amount of money. And one of the reasons for the high price tag was the fact it included a Boba Fett figure, who at the time was the only Star Wars minifigure to have arm printing. In addition to that, this particular set was exclusive to LEGO and therefore only sold in a small number of official LEGO stores, which made it rare from the day of release. The set has since soared over the years, and now a mint box version will cost you about £5,000. That's about a 20% return on investment each year. Well, in today's money, that set would be equivalent of about £145, which for a set which includes 7 minifigures, 4 of which were unique, isn't that bad. But the build itself was relatively small and it only included 675 pieces, which is about 20 pence per piece, which by today's standards is pretty high. So let's take a little deep dive into those minifigures. First off, we've got a Stormtrooper, which appeared in 3 other sets. Cloud City was actually his final appearance. The torso and the helmet were used in different variations of Stormtroopers later on in the year, but like most Stormtroopers, he isn't overly rare, and for that reason it's going to cost you about £10. Next we've got Darth Vader, and this design was actually first released in 1999 and appeared in 5 sets in total. Cloud City was also his final appearance, and like the Stormtrooper, the torso was also used some years later in different variations of Vader, as well as the face printing, albeit in bluish grey as opposed to the light grey seen here. The helmet design was the same as what we'd come to expect with all Darth Vaders up until 2015, when the mould was updated to include the separate neck piece. It's still a nice figure, but not overly rare, and therefore will cost you about £15. The set also included Han Solo, and I actually really like this minifigure. I love the nostalgia of the yellow faces and the simple face printing, and albeit the jacket printing is relatively basic, LEGO actually did a really good job in ensuring the yellow skin tones were shown underneath the open shirt, and it also includes some really nice detail on the leg and the hip for Han's gun belt. Albeit this minifigure was released 3 years earlier in a minifigure gear pack which also included Luke and Boba Fett, he remains relatively rare and will cost you around £60. Then this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. With the next 4 figures being unique to the set, we start to see why it's so expensive. So first up we've got Princess Leia, and she has a really nice hairpiece, but that was also shared with the 1999 Padme minifigure, so it doesn't actually hold any real value. It was also used a few years later in the Celebration Leia minifigure, but that colour was in dark brown. The torso, however, was unique, but if I'm honest, the print isn't great on this minifigure. The brown didn't actually match the trousers very well, and if you compare it to source material, that brown should actually be a dark red. There also isn't any leg printing, so her white gown just stops at the hips. And when you compare this minifigure to the 2018 example, you really appreciate how far minifigure design has improved over the years. And that older hair mould actually looks pretty sweet on the new design. But love or hate the design, it does include those unique parts which we all know drives the price up, and for that reason she is going to cost you upwards of £200. Moving on, we've got Lando Calrissian, and like Leia, his torso was also unique to this set, but it also included this beautiful cape which was printed in 2 colours as seen in the film. Now trying to find a mint one of those is no easy task, many are frayed or marked, and it's actually the most faked part of this minifigure. You'll see many aftermarket examples where the colour is simply too vibrant or the texture of the cape is too thick. If I compare it to this 20th anniversary minifigure, you can see the difference in colour which many fakes base their copies on. Nevertheless, it's going to cost you about £350 and maybe more depending on the condition of his cape. Up next we have Luke Skywalker, and his legs were the only unique part of this minifigure, and again they're hugely faked. I actually did a video linked above on how to spot some red flags if buying one. The torso was actually used in 7 other minifigures from City sets, and the head was also used in 7 other Luke minifigures. So if you ever buy one of these, just remember to always check the condition of the legs. One of the big red flags of the custom UV printed versions is they tend to use the reddish brown hips, whereas this version uses the older style brown, which is not used by LEGO today. With all that said, and due to its rarity, it's going to cost you about £400. And now on to what is one of the most iconic Star Wars minifigures LEGO have ever created, which is the Cloud City Boba Fett. So he includes the infamous arm and leg printing, which back in 2003 had never been attempted on a minifigure until Boba Fett was produced. Add that to the rarity of the set itself, and Boba Fett being a big fan favourite amongst Star Wars enthusiasts, this is the reason a mint example of this minifigure will cost you upwards of £2,000. Now it's worth mentioning that being such a sought after minifigure, he's also probably the most faked minifigure in the market today. So before I wrap this up, I'm just going to highlight a few red flags to look out for if you ever purchase one. So bear in mind the actual torso isn't overly expensive, and it was actually used in 3 other Boba Fett minifigures. So many fakes will actually use that torso to retain the Lego logo on the neck and then add some custom UV printed arms. If you look at my example, you'll see the arm printing is actually less than perfect, but you'll also notice you can see some very faint white underneath some of the yellow armour, and this is because the arms were printed in stages where the white was actually laid first, as you can see in this picture here. So if you see the arm printing where the gold is too vibrant and it's perfectly aligned, that can be a sign of an aftermarket UV print. Similar rules apply to the legs, where many of the fakes include the armour looking too gold and many didn't include that black shadow line on the armour print. Also, like Luke, many of the fake custom ones will use the reddish brown hips as opposed to the older style dark brown. So with all that said, will history ever repeat itself? And my guess is probably not. I think today sets are just much more attainable due to the wealth of high street shops and the ability to order direct from Lego on the internet. Now this obviously isn't a negative, but it just means that the rarity isn't there. Obviously there are always going to be examples where certain sets include desirable minifigures. If you look at the 2016 Rebel Combat Frigate, which included Ahsoka, or the Lando from the 2018 Cloud City, both of those sets had a really short shelf life and the minifigures remained unique, which drives the price up once they retire. So in rare circumstances, some minifigures may get near the heights of Boba Fett, but only if the availability was extremely limited, such as Finch Dalu, or promo polybags which included minifigures such as Darth Vader, the White Boba Fett, or the Shadow Arc Trooper. So anyway, there you have it, ladies and gents, a rundown of probably what is still the holy grail of Star Wars Lego collecting. Will we ever see another set like this again? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and please consider subscribing to my channel for more Lego Star Wars content. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.